In this video, I want to clear up a few things that I think people might find confusing around the novel coronavirus outbreak. And to do this, I need to get into a bit of technical detail. Now, I'm not a virologist by any means, but I have studied medicine and virology since I was a young boy. I found it fascinating. My father had many medical books, and most of them have medical information from the 60s and 70s, so it's fairly old, but still very much applicable to what I know about viruses. And what I want to cover with you are things specifically relating to what the government is saying to us and what many medical professionals are saying to us in layman's terms that could be misinterpreted, could be inaccurate, and in many cases actually are inaccurate. I've actually read through the government gazettes each time that new regulations are published, and the terms being used in there are medically and scientifically inaccurate often, and could actually make what they're saying invalid. And I just want to clear up a few things that I know for a fact. And the first thing that I want to explain is that COVID-19 is a name given to a new disease that the Chinese believe that they found in the Wuhan district in December of 2019, based on what they are willing to admit at this stage, and that the disease is very different to the virus that causes it. They believe that they discovered a new coronavirus, which they call a novel coronavirus because it is new. In other words, it's not in the existing database. Now, this means that the coronavirus family, that we know of many of them, and they cause various things in humans. And we just specifically want to speak about humans at this stage because we are being affected by this pandemic that's being declared by the World Health Organization. Animals are still in the same shape and form. They're either caged somewhere on a farm or they're running in the wild. We can't control what they're doing. As humans, we have minds and we listen to politicians, and politicians make rules and we seem to follow them in large. And that is why I want to clear these things up with you. The one thing that is being used very loosely is that we don't want COVID-19 to spread. Now, that is a bit of a problem in the way that it's stated, because you try to stop the spread of a virus. Now, at Koeberg Nuclear Power Station where I worked, I was a radiation worker, and we had to learn to not contaminate things. And there were very specific ways and means that we used to stop the spread of radioactive contamination. And there's a big difference between radioactive contamination and radiation and being irradiated. So you can receive radiation doses without being contaminated with radioactive material. And the virus that causes, according to scientists, and we're still trying to discover a lot about this, the virus that causes this disease called COVID-19 is the thing that is actually contaminating all over the world. And we need to stop the spread of this virus all over the place. So it's very much the same as radioactive contamination, which means it could be dust or particles that are radioactive that could actually cause harm to you. In the same way, this novel coronavirus, which has a name, it's called the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Okay, so it's the second one that was discovered. We know about SARS that broke out some time ago, and that SARS virus also caused respiratory problems, and that's why now they call it a SARS-CoV-2, because most professionals believe that it causes respiratory problems. They might not understand the mechanism by which it causes it properly. They might not understand the full disease properly. And this has become clear based on findings when autopsies started to be done, and especially places such as Italy, where in many other places like in South Africa, autopsies are not done to actually confirm what the disease is doing, and this is extremely troubling, and I will touch on that in a short while. What politicians are getting wrong is when they talk about the spread of COVID-19. It's a virus that spreads, so it's SARS-CoV-2 that can spread, and to understand how a virus spreads, because a disease only spreads through a virus, so you need to address the virus specifically. The first thing you need to understand is this virus is extremely small. In other words, for us to identify this virus and then see it, it needs to be done under a very specialized electron microscope. The other thing you need to know, if you've ever broken a porcelain bowl or plate, when it's not covered and you see the porcelain inside, it's coarse, but it's still very, very dense. That this SARS-CoV-2 virus can be filtered out using porcelain, which means that it will actually pass through that porcelain. So much for all these masks that the medical professionals speak of, and many of them have said that masks mean absolutely nothing, that it's just a symbolic thing, and it's stopping people from spitting things out into the open. But your mask will not protect you against this virus. It is physically and scientifically impossible. You would have to don a complete bubble suit, which is supplied by air and gets decontaminated after you finish in a specific area if you really want to get rid of the virus. So the SARS-CoV-2 virus is part of the small virus families, and you do get larger virus families. Now, a virus, for instance, like the Ebola virus, it's important to understand that the death rate of the Ebola virus is about 50%. So 50% of people that contract Ebola would die. Now, that is serious. I mean, if I knew that Ebola was in town, I would isolate myself and government wouldn't have to say anything, because I understand that once you're contaminated with this virus, your chances of survival is 1 in 2. Those aren't odds that I'm willing to mess with. When it comes to the SARS-CoV-2 virus, we didn't initially know what the death rate would be. And no one would know because it's a novel new virus. And no, it's not G5 and it's not many other things that people say. And I will do videos on that later and explain in detail why 5G cannot cause this novel coronavirus, which is an entity in and of itself. So this virus that is so small would have certain characteristics that will make it remain viable or non-viable on certain surfaces under certain temperatures and certain conditions for longer or shorter periods of time. And the important thing to know about this novel coronavirus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, is it doesn't handle well in sun. In other words, it takes it a few minutes in direct sunlight and the virus is non-viable. Because viruses are not alive, they are not living creatures, they are not multicellular creatures. The different viruses you get are either from the RNA or the DNA type. And the novel coronavirus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, is of the RNA type. So to identify this virus, you need to do a RNA sequencing, where you can actually look at the RNA of the specific virus and identify it exactly. And know, for instance, that someone has been infected and has started to multiply and populate this virus within your body. Because some people can actually get the virus, maybe a few thousand get into you, and it could not start duplicating at all. Which means that you have no chance of actually being tested positive for the novel coronavirus. So many people could be exposed to it and never even really become positive, SARS-CoV-2 positive. Now, what does it mean to be SARS-CoV-2 positive? What that means is that the virus has actually started duplicating inside your body, replicating, infiltrating your body's cells, replicating more of itself, and that population grows by billions and billions of viruses within your body and could easily then be detected with a swab and various other methods And then the most accurate test is do a RNA sequencing on that virus to actually know exactly that it is this SARS-CoV-2 novel coronavirus. So that process is well established, has been there for decades, it's well tried and tested. So there's no funny business with regards to that. Then there's a second kind of test that can be done to actually find out whether you're positive with the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and that is to see whether the traces of your body having fought this virus that's left behind afterwards, to actually know what they are and then test for that. Now this test is less accurate, but in the US, for instance, when they started conducting this test, which means that someone had already contracted the virus multiplied within their bodies. This still doesn't mean that the disease developed, okay? Multiplied within their bodies, and then you can pick up the antibodies. And when you do this test and you find these antibodies in a person, you know that they've contracted the virus. They could have contracted the disease, it's possible, but they've gone through that without even knowing that they had COVID-19 or that they were SARS-CoV-2 positive. And when they started conducting these tests in the US, they noticed that lots of people, already had this virus at some stage. And they were just never tested. So the virus is far more prevalent than most people know. You need to understand this, that our testing is way behind. And in South Africa, there's probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people walking around with this virus. This is a real possibility based on evidence in other countries. So you need to understand that this virus is extremely small, that it can be accurately tested, that there's other tests that's not as accurate, but that can prove that you had already contracted the virus and shows us that it's far more prevalent than originally thought, which means that the death rate of this virus is far less than the current percentages, which makes it in line with the common cold or flu deaths, which means that is something that we've lived with for decades, the flu. I mean, since I can remember, flu has been around, and we are not locking people down because of that. Now, when a new virus like this comes out and we don't know what the results of or effects of that virus will be, you need to take immediate drastic action. It's the right thing to do. And at Koeberg, if there's contamination, there's immediate actions that's taken to stop that radioactive contamination from spreading at the source instantly. You don't wait around and think about it like our politicians did. I mean, our government is trying to laud itself for acting fast. There's no ways that they acted fast. We had tons of people coming from overseas, coming from China. We allowed those flights to come in. They were fully in the know that there's people on their way that could have this virus, and they did nothing initially. Nothing. Then, when this virus arrived here for the first time, all the tests that were done were only done, and I find this interesting, on people that were in countries that had the virus, where it had been confirmed. They refused to do testing locally in South Africa, and I find this extremely suspicious. And I'll tell you why in a second. It's possible that that virus could have originated here and spread to other places. If you don't test the people here, you wouldn't know. And most people not contracting COVID-19, and I'll get to that just now, wouldn't even know that they had the virus. So if they had gone and tested everyone, they would see how prevalent it is. Now the US went and did this. And with this testing, they realized that there were way more people that had the virus much earlier than they had thought. And this hasn't been properly studied yet and has been swept under the carpet. So we don't actually know how to exactly trace the origins of this virus and how it spread, because I know by the time I did Italy and Spain, there were various strains of the virus already, which means it's the same virus but with certain mutations that it started changing, or it was already changed when it was discovered there. Now, I don't want to speculate on what it is that caused those viruses to have mutated so fast, because this is not normal. It can take months and years in nature for a virus to mutate. So definitely big question marks, and we need to find out what actually happened with regards to that. And I'm keeping my ear on the ground and my eyes focused on people that I communicate with to get the truth. The other thing that you need to know about this virus is the fact that it causes the disease to develop in very few people. In those people where the disease develops, and we don't actually understand this disease fully, this I have to make clear to you. So those people within which this COVID-19 disease then develop, very few of them end up in hospital. So most of those people might just have a bit of a headache, mild symptoms, they remain at home, and they're perfectly fine. Few of them, maybe 20%, end up in hospital. Of those, another 10% end up in ICU. So the numbers drop exponentially for people that end up in ICU and actually end up dying from COVID-19. And almost all those people we know have comorbidities. The problem in South Africa at the moment is that we don't actually test the people to see how they died. If a person was tested positive for the SARS-CoV-2 virus, because you cannot be tested positive for COVID-19. This is impossible and is incorrect when anyone uses that. Cyril Ramaphosa, whoever, when they say that you contracted or you were exposed to COVID-19, it's not true. You get exposed to a virus and that disease could develop within you. Now, this disease that develops, scientists are still studying. And most countries are not performing autopsies on the people that are listed as having died of SARS-CoV-2 virus infection and then developing COVID-19. So as I mentioned before in my one video, in the United Kingdom, they actually state that these are people that have died, that have tested positive for SARS-CoV-2. They don't say that these people died from COVID-19. And it's the same for South Africa. I verified that with a baby that was born prematurely and after 2 days passed on because of the baby's lungs that were not matured. This baby did 100% not die from COVID-19 disease development. But because this baby's mother was SARS-CoV-2 positive, the baby also was tested SARS-CoV-2 positive. And guess what the cause of death was? COVID-19. This is a lie. This is not accurate. And I will show you a video with the evidence that proves that our death numbers in South Africa are not accurate. That those numbers reflect people that were SARS-CoV-2 positive and then died. No one in South Africa can prove that they died from COVID-19 disease development.